This case is filled with challenging details, but it's absolutely fascinating. No matter how you look at it, this story carries important lessons. I'll try to narrate it in a neutral way, and everyone is welcome to discuss further in the comments. The woman you see here is Taylor Schabusiness. She was born in November 1997 and grew up in a family of 4, with her parents and younger brother. But despite how happy they might have seemed, each family member had their own struggles. Taylor's mother struggled with severe alcohol issues. Even after health warnings, she drank every day. In the end, when Taylor was just 11, her mother suddenly passed away while the family was watching a movie together. This left a big impact on Taylor, but this was only the beginning of this family's turbulent story. After her mother's death, Taylor's father, Arturo Coronado, moved with her and her brother into an apartment complex. The building was full of single-parent families, and Taylor's brother quickly made friends with other kids his age, which helped Arturo get to know the other parents. One of these parents caught Arturo's attention, and after creating chances to connect, they soon started dating and eventually merged their families. This new family didn't bring Taylor any joy, though. At home, she rarely spoke, but outside, she was tough and outspoken. This contrast made her family think she was hard to get along with. By high school, Taylor was deeply into hardcore music and had become a gaming fan, especially enjoying action and competitive games. Yet, these interests didn't keep her indoors. She was skilled at skateboarding, a sport that allowed her to meet 2 of her most important friends. AJ and Chad became Taylor's best friends during her rebellious phase. They often went on adventures together and even tried some daring things. Taylor's increasingly rebellious behavior started to worry her family. They eventually insisted that she see a psychologist, who diagnosed her with significant emotional regulation and attention issues. To manage her condition, the doctor prescribed medication, but the side effects only worsened her emotional instability and heightened certain impulses. Taylor found the side effects unbearable and refused to continue the medication, which ultimately led to her staying in a mental health facility for a while. According to the doctors, Taylor's struggles likely stemmed from the loss of her mother and the tension she observed between her father and stepmother. In such a family environment, her chances of recovery seemed slim. By high school, Taylor began skipping classes frequently, staying away from home and focusing on just 3 things with her friends, experimenting with questionable substances, pursuing inappropriate relationships, and starting fights with classmates or even teachers. These actions drew the attention of the police several times. Her family was frustrated and tried to reason with her, but she often responded with aggression. After an incident where she lost her temper and threw a candlestick at her stepmother, her family finally gave up and sent her to live with her grandparents in Texas. It wasn't until years later that people learned Taylor may have intentionally distanced herself from her troubled family. After she graduated, she returned to Wisconsin, where her father Arturo had recently been charged with inappropriate behavior toward minors. Arturo's wife had divorced him over the incident, but he continued to avoid legal consequences by exploiting loopholes, staying out of jail. Watching her father live so freely brought painful memories back to Taylor. She confided in a trusted relative, revealing that she too had experienced traumatic incidents involving her father during childhood. Now, seeing him live without repercussions, Taylor wanted to testify against him as a key witness to finally hold him accountable. However, after sharing her plan, she seemed to hesitate and even denied it. During Arturo's release on bail, Taylor surprisingly chose to live with him again, leaving those around her bewildered. After a chaotic adolescence, Taylor seemed to start taking life seriously. She married a man named Warren, seemingly aiming for a stable family life. But those who knew the couple well were aware that Taylor had a long-standing dependency issue, and Warren was not only her close companion but also a frequent source of the substances she relied on. Their relationship was built around convenience rather than love. One summer day in 2020, Taylor found herself caught up in her habits at home and began wandering around her neighborhood, knocking on people's doors. Frustrated, the neighbors called the police. But when the officers arrived, Taylor was still completely out of touch with reality. She lashed out at the officers, shouting about how she was still on high. This incident led to Taylor's first official encounter with the legal system, but because the disruption hadn't caused any serious harm, she received a 3-year probation sentence. However, Taylor didn't learn her lesson. 2 months later, she took her high onto the highway, where she engaged in a reckless chase with the police. Once officers finally stopped her, they found prohibited substances in her car, a serious offense in the U.S. This time, Taylor was formally taken into custody and sentenced to 2 months in jail. After her release, Taylor was required to wear an ankle monitor and complete her probation at home. But just a month later, her husband Warren was taken into custody after a significant quantity of illicit items was discovered in his vehicle. Warren now faced federal charges, and his future likely held a long prison sentence. Taylor's life took another unexpected turn. Soon after Warren's imprisonment, she found out she was expecting a child. This realization brought a wave of fear and a desire for change. She reached out to her stepmother, hoping to learn how to become a good mother. With her stepmother's help, Taylor welcomed a baby boy in 2021. Yet, just as it seemed Taylor might be on a better path, tragedy struck. Her younger brother, who hadn't been wearing a helmet, lost his life in a motorcycle accident. This event seemed to either solidify Taylor's view of her own fate or push her further into despair, leading her down an increasingly self-destructive path. Seeking solace, Taylor reconnected with her childhood friends AJ and Tyrion. The three of them had always shared similar interests, and now, without parental oversight, they indulged in their old habits more freely. During this time, Taylor realized she had feelings for Shad. So, while Warren was still serving his sentence, Taylor moved in with Shad, bringing her son along. However, Shad had no idea that his choice to be with Taylor would soon lead him down a path filled with unforeseen consequences. By early 2022, Taylor's cravings got the best of her, but she was out of supplies. She decided to remove her ankle monitor, hopped in her car with Shad, and headed over to meet AJ. After some time together indulging, Taylor followed Shad back to his house. His mom was out for the evening, leaving the place to themselves. They went down to the basement, where they brought out an odd assortment of items you'd expect more in an interrogation room: ropes, chains, and other tools. Whatever their purpose, Taylor and Shad seemed to enjoy the thrill. Taylor climbed onto Shad's back, pulling a collar around his neck without a thought for his coughing and struggling. Within a few minutes, he went completely still. Taylor's next move was even harder to understand. She didn't try to help or call anyone. Instead, while Shad was still warm, she took time for herself. Afterward, Taylor still seemed out of it. She went to Shad's kitchen, grabbed a tool, and began handling things, right there in the basement. An hour later, exhausted, she fell asleep beside what was left of Shad. When Taylor woke up, she realized Shad's mom might have returned, sending her into a cold sweat. She steadied herself, washed up using a bucket of red liquid, and carefully arranged Shad's remains before grabbing a leg and heading home. It was still dark out, so she managed to avoid scaring anyone on the way. The next day, Shad's mom discovered the horrifying scene in the basement. When the police arrived, it took them a while to reassemble Shad's remains, minus one leg. Given the evidence, Taylor was the main suspect. They found her at her home, covered in what looked like red stains. It was all too clear. The police arrested her, and Taylor openly described the entire incident in graphic detail. Her story was so vivid that even seasoned officers were taken aback. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Taylor's lawyer argued her innocence, claiming she had suffered from mental health issues since her teenage years. However, doctors working with the prosecutor determined she was fully aware of her actions, so the case continued to drag on into early 2023. In a 2023 court hearing, Taylor's lawyer was attempting to buy more time for her defense. However, Taylor suddenly acted out, even attacking her lawyer in the courtroom. This incident unsettled her lawyer to the point that he requested to step down, asking the court to assign a new representative for Taylor. The new lawyer, though clearly hesitant, continued to plead not guilty on her behalf, arguing that Taylor's obsession with certain infamous cases indicated an unstable state of mind. Meanwhile, Taylor's legal husband, Warren, who was still serving his sentence, also wrote a letter expressing his belief in her innocence. He claimed that Taylor was not inherently a bad person, but that her judgment had been compromised by substances. Although he acknowledged that his own reputation was at stake, he didn't want Taylor to suffer unjust blame. Despite their attempts to argue otherwise, the weight of Taylor's crimes could not be ignored. Finally, on July 26, 2023, Taylor was sentenced to life in prison. Perhaps, from this point on, she will find some semblance of stability in her life.